topic, which is, as you know, all of the REIN forms, they change every 6 months or so. And so they are changing again for us effective January 4th. And so I think there are several forms that we need to be aware of, and a new form. Oh, and I have a really interesting tidbit to share with you about the source of funds discussion, because if you're anything like me, this was it's been confusing since the jump, since they rolled this new protected class out a couple of months ago. And so I've listened to the attorneys explain it now, I think 5 times. So I'm going to try to explain it to you. And it was very, very much, well, very much more. It was good. So let's say that. Let me just silence my phone here, so that won't be a distraction. So, okay, guys, so we'll click over to REIN. So go with me here. And there we go. So when you guys log into REIN, this is what you see, right? This is, well, this is not technically what you see. This is what you see, and then you have to log in order to see that. So new year, new forms, right? And so if you have any questions about this, this is where you can go and spend some more time learning about this. And so right over here on the right side of the screen, you see the VIP Broker Symposium. And that's a video, and it's about 45 minutes long, and it is brokers and attorneys explaining the updates and the modifications to these forms. So if you do have any questions, or if you don't feel like I went into enough detail, feel free to go back into here and watch this video and listen to them. I'm going to try to be, a little more engaging and entertaining than the attorneys, but it probably won't take that long to get through this. So if we have questions, we should have plenty of time to talk about it and maybe go into some detail. And we'll just go through these forms one at a time and see if they make sense to us or if we need further explanation. So my thought for today is we'll read through the highlighted areas of each form, and then we'll open that form up and take a look at it to see what it actually looks like in real life. And so that's kind of where I thought we would start. We're going to start with the resale forms. We probably won't get too far into the rental forms because they're just not as commonly used, I think, by most of us. But there is something really interesting in that I want to share with you, which is that source of funds protected class. So anybody got any questions before we get started, or should we just move right into it? Move right into it. All right. So residential property data input sheet was updated. So the features, I thought this was kind of interesting. So the interior features have changed to change the word master bedroom to primary bedroom. So, and there was an additional add to make, instead of a master bedroom having a double sink, for example, now it's the primary double sink or sink double as an option. And so we'll take a look at that. So the features section has also changed to reference first floor master bedroom. Now it says first floor primary bedroom, and you can see where they've changed those initials there. Rooms also changed. Approximate master bedroom dimensions has been changed to approximate primary bedroom dimensions. So the move from master to primary was made to provide for a more inclusive listing database and to adhere to changing industry standards. And then, of course, the features at the bottom, miscellaneous and vacant, were what they did is they removed the word vacant from the pick list to eliminate it sometimes accidentally showing up in other portal kind of websites like, maybe homes.com or realtor.com or one of those sites, hgtv.com, might have accidentally picked up that the home was vacant and included that in the public information, which is obviously dangerous. And so we don't want the whole world knowing when a home is vacant. And so I'll show you where they moved that to. So hopefully you can see this form now, the residential property data input form. And so what is really nice about the way they do this is they redline what they've removed and they highlight or indicate where the new change has taken place. And so right at the top here, you can see vacant. They've taken it out of the pick list on the bottom and they've added it to its own category here so that it doesn't get accidentally included in publicly available information. So you'll want to be on the lookout for that when you're filling this form out. And so we just kind of scroll through then in order to find the next obvious change. And so green obviously indicates those items that are defined as energy efficient changes. And so here we can see that the first floor, what used to be MBR is now PBR, primary bedroom. And again, primary bedroom fireplace and primary sink double. And you do want to try to use as many of these tick boxes as we can, because these are searchable fields. So if someone is only looking for or has search parameters set to find a primary bedroom with a double vanity, then they won't find it if you don't have this box checked when you're filling this form out. So it's important that you do take the few minutes that it takes to fill out as many of these tick boxes as you can, because all of these fields become searchable by our clients and other agents. And so there's a lot of green energy efficient stuff on here now. So it's getting bigger and bigger. This is where under miscellaneous, this is where it used to say vacant. And you can see they removed it from here and they added it to the top. And they changed it here, primary bedroom dimensions instead of master bedroom dimensions. Okay, and that's it. So that's all of the changes then for the residential property data input form. So make sense? Good on that one? Cool. All right. So the residential multifamily data input form. And again, a lot of this is repetitive because some of these changes they had to carry through on every single one of our documents. And so I won't take nearly as much time going through some of these, but we can look to the multifamily data input form, which not probably isn't as popular. But again, we see the word vacant up here in its own category now versus being on the bottom. And then again, they've changed from master to primary bedroom to be more inclusive in keeping with the ever-changing standards. So lots of green, lots of green. All right, and they've taken the word vacant out here. And that's it. Pretty simple. Any questions about that one? No. All right, cool. So the commercial industrial data input, the only thing they did here is they added the word none as a financing option. Apparently it didn't used to be there. I don't know, I don't do a lot of commercial stuff, so I wouldn't have recognized it if it wasn't there. But they added the word none as one of the financing options. Let's see if I can find it. I think I went through it too fast. Somebody stop me. Financing here. Okay, so there. So that's where it's at. So that was really the only change that they made to this particular document. Okay. The buyer's acknowledgement of receipt of cooperative interest package disclosure. That's a mouthful. So on page 1, they removed the seller initial line. The seller initial lines are not necessary since the seller does not sign page 2 of the form. So we'll take a quick look at that. So the buyer's acknowledgement of receipt of the cooperative interest package disclosures. I don't know about you guys, I've never been involved in a co-op transaction. So this is not a form that I'm familiar with or have spent any time looking at, but apparently the seller does not need to initial the bottom of this form. And so they've only removed those spaces provided. And that's it. Simple dimple. And then we have the disclosure of dual agency or dual representation in a residential real estate transaction. So they added buyer and seller initial lines to page 1 because sometimes some of our forms only include a signature or an initial box on the last page, which was the case here. And so they've added some initial boxes then to the bottom of page 1. So initial for the buyer, initial for the seller here. You can see that it didn't used to be there. And then, of course, on page 2, they removed the request for the agent or broker to sign this form, as it just wasn't necessary. Cool. Disclosure of dual agency or dual representation in a real estate transaction. This is probably a form that we don't use very often. I know that many of us try to shy away from that fine line referred to as dual agency. It can be a little intimidating and hard to manage your responsibilities as impartial on both sides of a transaction. So disclosure of designated agents or representatives in a real estate transaction. And again, this is the same as the other one. This just happens to be for designated agents versus dual agents. And so you can see again, they've added initial boxes, buyer and seller, to the bottom of page 1, and they've removed the request for the agent or broker to sign the bottom of that form, as it is a disclosure for the purpose of the buyer and the seller understanding their position or the agent's position in this transaction. Good. Disclosure of dual agency or dual representation in a commercial real estate transaction. This is a new form, so they didn't used to have this for commercial. And so somebody, a commercial agent, no doubt thought that it would be a good idea to have this available in a commercial transaction. And so this is literally a reproduction of the residential form, only for commercial purposes. Okay. And then this is where we probably spend most of our time. And so this one will take us a few minutes to get through. The standard purchase agreement. And so there were several changes made to this. Some are more interesting than others. Updated reference to deed as appropriate in the text, only because they don't actually define the term deed in the text. So they scratched that out. And I'll show you that. Property condition. Language was added to indicate whether a buyer has physically inspected the property. If a buyer has not physically inspected the property, the inspection addendum must be executed. So they created this, it used to be the sight unseen addendum, and now they call it the no physical inspection addendum. Okay. Paragraph 13C2, they updated the language to incorporate system inspector as outlined. That's the septic system inspector, because the code changed not long ago with respect to septic inspections and who's able or qualified to do those inspections. And then paragraph 16, confirmations and disclosures, they added a reference to chapter 7, form for buyers and sellers to acknowledge receipt of this form in addition to the CDIF, and removed by their initials below. The deleted text is not needed and was not consistent with the language used in the REIN contracts and forms. And then they got rid of the defective drywall paragraph, which I thought was interesting. But apparently the legislatures in Richmond decided that that was no longer relevant. And so they were able to shorten our contracts by about 2 inches. So still very long. But they did remove the defective drywall disclosure requirement paragraph. And dispute resolution. This also was interesting. Mediation language was expanded to include a time frame for response to a request for mediation. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when we look at the form. And then there was a signature page, added additional protected classes that are required by law, and added a statement incorporating all protected classes at federal, state, and local levels. And this is one of those changes that carried out throughout most all of the documents that we'll see today. And so let's click over to our standard purchase agreement and start to scroll down to where we see those changes. And go down. The red line edition. So kind of cool. So this was the first change that they identified. So it used to say deed defined below, but they didn't actually define it below. And so they made that typographical correction there and replaced it with simply the word deed. So here is one of the first big changes, and that the buyer has or has not physically inspected the property in person prior to execution of this agreement. If the buyer has not physically inspected the property, the buyer is required to execute the no physical inspection addendum at the time of this agreement, or at the time this agreement is executed, and shall be incorporated into this agreement. So this is new for us. This is something that it is required, because I think what the suggestion was is that sometimes we wouldn't necessarily tell the listing agent that our buyer hasn't actually been there. You know, maybe they would include the sight unseen addendum, maybe they wouldn't. But now it's actually required that you include this no physical inspection addendum if the buyer has not physically been to the property. So I think that's probably a good idea to help, protect all of us. Some of us look at that home inspection as a get out of jail free card without disclosing that our buyer hasn't actually been there, and that we did a video tour of the property, or that we sent them additional pictures, but they live 3,000 miles away. And so this is meant as a way to ensure that we disclose whether or not the buyer has been there. And then the septic. And so this probably doesn't change our lives in any meaningful way, because they didn't go into the definition of an accredited septic system inspector. You'd have to look to the Virginia code for that. But either or is fine. Either an accredited septic system inspector or an individual who holds a valid on-site sewage system operator, on-site sewage system installer, or soil evaluator license pursuant to Chapter 23. So I don't think this really changes the way we do business. There's no additional requirement on us, depending on the company that you use. Obviously, you want a licensed and insured septic company, and chances are very, very good that they will fall under one of these categories. And then you see some lines over here, because when they edit these, sometimes it changes the paragraph number and or letter associated with that. And so we'll see that again in just a minute. So the CDIF and the summary of rights and obligations to seller and purchasers under the Virginia Residential Property Disclosure Act. So this is what they included, and they removed the words by their initials below. And then again, they've included it here and the summary of rights. So those forms are part of our contract package, and they are required. And I think we've probably all been used to using those and including those. So here is the defective drywall section that they were able to remove. And that looks like it's about 2 inches maybe to me. So so that is gone now. So that's not something that we need to continue to talk about. So I only ran into it one time. I don't know about you guys, but one time I found a property and helped a buyer purchase a property that had been impacted by the defective drywall. And it had been fully remediated, and it was in the city of Newport News. And the city had gone in and they've done their testing and their air quality testing, and so it was perfectly fine. But that was the only one time that I've ever ran into a defective drywall issue. I know in some areas it was much more prominent. So dispute resolution. So this is new for us too, guys. So this is something that you might want to, stick into the memory banks, because what they've done, and they told a story. So if you have time, go back and watch that video, because the attorneys told a story of where this change originated, and it was pretty interesting. And so what they've done here is they've added a 30-day timeline to the request for arbitration to be responded to by the other party, right? The intent is to arbitrate instead of, or versus litigate, right? Because going to court is expensive. Going to court requires time, energy, and effort. And so if we can cure something or come to an agreement through arbitration, that might be the preferred method. What happened was a seller was accusing a buyer of breach of contract, and they wanted to arbitrate, but there was no requirement on the seller, on the buyer to respond. And so the buyer just ignored every request. And so finally, it ended up in court in front of a judge who said, well, your contract requires arbitration prior to litigation. And I understand it's been 6 months, but there's no timeline for the buyer to respond or to arbitrate. So you can't litigate yet. And so that's, in a nutshell, what prompted this change. And so now they've given the parties 30 days to respond or to, settle through arbitration before moving into court and getting in front of a judge. So,
we've actually had 2 cases where the other side has refused to participate. And so you can't move forward. You can't do anything other than, like you say, go to court. And if the clients choose to do that, of course, but that's costly. And so we're just kind of hanging in the wind right now, waiting to see what we're going to be doing.
That's awful. Yeah. That's awful. They told that really interesting story, and I think that
It isn't like a regulatory size for shipping labels, right? I mean, they're not gonna. I mean, they should.
Oh, sorry. So I mean, you're living through that right now, it sounds like, and so now, in an effort to cure that, they've put this timeline in place. They've also added a sentence here to require that the principal broker and supervising broker of both the listing and the selling firms be notified. And they said that this is the only place in any of our contracts that the principal broker is required to be notified. And so the hope there is that, if you have an agent who has stuck their head in the sand, and we're not getting anywhere, that the principal broker, through notification, might become involved in the process and keep this out of court.
May I say something that's very interesting?
Yeah.
The 2 cases that we've had, Nick D'Ambrosia, who is our principal broker, I reached out to because I felt it was my obligation as the broker of the agent to go along with the agent. And Nick D'Ambrosia told us neither of you are going. The dispute is between the buyer and the seller. You can help them prepare their documents, but as far as you being involved in the mediation hearing, I do not want you to go, because either one of you could say something that could be turned into something else. And so why would you go just to go and keep your mouth shut? If you feel like our party is not in the wrong, then no, you do not go. And you let the mediator know that you will not be attending. which I had to do. And I know Dave, the mediator, really well. And it was kind of hard for me to, after I'd had him in the office talking about mediation and everything else, to say, gosh, Dave, I'm sorry, but my agent and myself, we will not be attending or participating. We'll send you the documents for you to review from our side. So there you go from our principal broker.
That's really interesting. I had no idea.
Does that change? Does the 30 days in here? I mean, does the giving it to your brokers, does that make that change? Because now you've disclosed everything to everybody.
Well, I think anybody would automatically let their principal broker know right away. And I then got back with Dave to let him know that I was instructed by Nick D'Ambrosia and copied Nick that we would not participating. I think this is just saying that you, rather than like Jason was saying, rather than just ignoring it forever and ever, never responding, it is telling you here you have to do some kind of response within 30 days. Is that what you get, Jason?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. So very cool. Well, thank you for sharing that. I did not know
right.
I thought, man, if my client goes, I probably will need to go with them. And so it's good to know. I'm staying home. And let's see, what do we got next on the, okay. And so on the signature page, we mentioned that they added these protected classes, both under federal, state, or local law. And so this is an adjustment. This is a change that you'll see throughout many of the documents that they've made changes and updates to. And so we'll see.
I knew about the others, but when did the veteran status, is that a brand new thing, or did I totally miss something?
I don't know. They didn't talk about that. I'm not sure. Yeah. So
I mean, did you know about veteran, that they were protected now?
Only when I heard about this.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where do we go to find out what's federal, state, and local law?
Well, I think what happens is, because you have obviously you have a national fair housing statute, and then you have a Virginia fair housing statute, which adds a couple of classes to that. And then if you had something for the city of Hampton or the city of Virginia Beach, for example, then that too would become part of, the protected classes identified through this contract, and prevent, discrimination on the grounds of. So I think you would, if you wanted to know, you probably have to check with your local locality, your local government, in order to find out if there are anything in addition to the national and the state protected classes. This is kind of like a blanket, we're covering all of these. All right. So that's probably the majority of what you'll see in your daily life. And so we'll close.
Hey, Jason.
Out. Yes.
Did I miss the answer on veteran status?
No, what we determined was that we're not sure when veterans were added to as a protected class. I don't know exactly when that came out. So
this year, probably, because I have never seen it up until you just mentioned it.
And I had never seen it until I started reviewing these changes. Yeah. So
was there a purpose that you know of behind adding veterans to?
No, I've not heard any discussion about it since it's adding.
Okay, nope. I'll look it up.
Yep. Standard new construction residential purchase agreement. And so this is very similar. There's a lot of things in here that we've probably just looked at. The difference is, obviously, this is a new construction purchase agreement and not a resale purchase agreement. And so it looks very, very similar with a few differences and modifications. And so we'll go through. Here's the deed. So they took this part out and they replaced it with the word deed. I want to figure out, you guys, and if you have any of you know this, tell me. I want to make my mouse like have one of those yellow circles around it or something. You have to do those spotlights on your mouse so that it's easier for people to follow. I have Googled it and can't find it. So if you have one, let me know where to get it, please. And disclosures, again, they added the summary of rights and obligations to both of these paragraphs, just like they did in the standard purchase agreement for resale property. And so the website for Megan's Law has updated. And so we'll see this in a couple of different places where the website, the web address has changed. And so you can see that that website there has changed for them to get information about that. They removed the defective drywall section. They changed the word owners to owners. So I think all they did was move the apostrophe there. And then, of course, our protected classes, again, are expanded upon on the signature page. Okay. Unimproved lot purchase agreement. Again, this is not something that I see a lot of. Get it? Pun intended. Again, with the deed reference over here. And again, with the summary of rights and obligations. And again, with the protected classes. A wee bit redundant there. Not something we see all the time. Standard listing agreement, as you might imagine, is going to have several changes in it because it needs to match up with the standard purchase agreement and its references. So the property will not be available for marketing and showing until the beginning of the listing period. And this is a point they really wanted to drive home because I think what they've seen and what we've probably all seen is that homes are showing up on Facebook or Instagram that are not currently in REIN yet or not being marketed. And so, you know, we had a recent discussion with REIN about this. And what the rule says in REIN is that there should be no identifiable images of the property shared. So, you know, my position is if you share a picture of a property that does not have a street address on it, it's not identifiable because there could be a million properties like that. My opinion and REIN says is not correct. So, so be careful. They do not want you promoting or talking coming soon marketing. So don't do it. Save yourself the hassle and just wait. You know, if you've got 2 days to put it into REIN after they sign the listing agreement or after the listing agreement becomes effective. So use that time if you must. But definitely have your paperwork in order before you start promoting that property online. That's a big deal to them. And you know how it came about in our experience was that another agent had reported it. And so you don't know who's looking at your stuff on social media, right? You thought it was going to be a harmless ad and you were going to share it with your friends and family. Hey, look at this great house that's going to be coming up next week. But another agent saw it and said, hey, they can't do that. And they reported it to REIN, and then REIN contacted me. And so we have this difference of opinion, but they're in charge. So.
Right. And REIN is one of the few MLSs in the country that doesn't allow coming soon things to be touted. So just because MRIS or William, you know, or one of the other MLSs allow it, REIN does not.
I don't know why. I don't know.
Okay, and to answer y'all's question about the veteran
Yes.
status, It was July 1st, 2020.
July 1st,
What?
2020, it was
Wow,
added.
we didn't know. Ooh.
It was added with source of funds, sexual orientation, gender identity, and then of course veterans.
Man, we
Yeah.
must have all had COVID or something.
It, and by the way, it takes a very long time to figure that out because since y'all started talking about it, I've been looking.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we got the word, of course, about the, source of funds. You'd have thought they'd have told us about the veteran status at the same time. I mean, that's
Nope.
Yeah,
crazy, but thank God you got it and we know it. So
Yeah, July 1.
July 2020. Excellent. Thank you, Stacia, for doing that. But there was a
problem.
lot of discussion around source of funds, and I'm looking forward to sharing more details with you in just a minute about that. But they never, I don't really remember them highlighting the addition of veterans. So
nope.
again, remove the defective drywall paragraph and added, of course, our protected classes here. That is our standard listing agreement. Additional signature page. Again, so if you have more than 2 buyers or 2 sellers, then you're going to need some additional space. And so they provide then this additional signature page to be used. And they've only added then the protected classes to the top of this page as well. And so as some of you know, I mean, you can have 4, 5, 6, 7 or more potential buyers or sellers in a transaction. And that's when it's really fun and exciting. So I can only imagine the lender, needing, like 5 different credit applications. That'd be awful. So the addendum to the non-exclusive marketing or listing agreement. This is not something that we use. We use the exclusive. So you probably won't see this, but if you do see this, they've added then the protected classes just prior to the signature box. Okay. And the summary of rights and obligations. This form was updated to match the real estate board property disclosure statement. So very, very similar there. Let's take a look at that real quick. And you can see they've updated the website here, d4.virginia.gov, historic district ordinances. Stormwater detention was removed. Related, other, conservation authority. So basically they try to make this representative of the Virginia code and the law as it changes. And so as those law sections change, then they make the updates, the appropriate updates to these documents. Okay.
Hey, Jason,
Yes.
on that one that you were just showing us, it still shows you that you have to disclose the drywall. If you go down to 15, I think it was.
Oh, you're fast. So, oh, it does. What this?
They haven't updated that one to coincide with what they've done with the standard purchase agreement.
Right. I think that's an interesting observation that this hasn't been removed. But remember, the summary of rights and obligations of a seller and purchaser under the Virginia Residential Property Disclosure Act is simply letting them know that it's incumbent upon them to do their own inspections and be comfortable with, all of these different potential conditions of a property.
That is their
and
responsibility.
So it's on them.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, you're right. It's still there. And the sight unseen addendum is no longer the sight unseen addendum. It's called the no physical inspection addendum. And so you can see they've made some adjustments to the wording here. Buyer physically inspecting the property in person and without representation, warranties or covenants from a seller. So this document is required to be included in any offer where the buyer has not physically stepped foot on the property. So I know I personally have helped a lot of people, mostly veterans coming into Virginia from out of state, buy homes through the use of video and additional pictures and things like that. And it's always worked out really well for me. I had one guy, Travis, I'll never forget him. He was really disappointed when he got to Virginia because the house was much smaller than he had expected. It was over in Gloucester. And but out of the, probably a dozen or so, he was the only person that was, disappointed or in some way let down by his sight unseen purchase. So I think all in all, it is an effective way to help buyers and sellers meet their goals. You just want to do the very best that you can in presenting the condition of the property. So. All right. And so that does it then for the resale section of the pages. But I just wanted to touch on this one because it does open up that discussion around the source of funds. And so the Declaration of Ownership Interest Addendum. And so this is a brand new form. It's for landlords. And it's incumbent upon the landlords to disclose to us as the realtors whether or not they are or are not exempt from the source of funds protection. So it's really interesting. So if you take the time to come back to this document, you can read it here. They do a pretty good explanation of what it is, but I'll try to tell you in a nutshell. So the source of funds protection applies to landlords who own more than 10% interest in more than 4 properties. So if you own 4 properties in the state of Virginia, you're not required to comply with the source of funds protection. You can be exempt from that, which means you don't have to take Section 8 vouchers by the state of Virginia. You can, in essence, say, I don't want to accept Section 8 as a means of collecting rent or allowing this tenant to rent my property. If you own more than 5 or more properties, or 10% interest in more than 4 dwellings right here, then you must comply with the source of funds protection, which means that you are required under Virginia law to accept Section 8 vouchers. And so the thought then is, how might this apply? This might apply to, someone who owns or has ownership interest in several LLC companies, or, maybe a flipper who owns, 5, 6, 15, 20 houses that they're in the process of flipping. They still have more than a 10% ownership interest in 4 dwelling or in more than 4 dwelling units. And so they must then comply, if they're advertising a place for rent, with the source of funds protection. So does that clear it up for you guys at all? Does that make sense? Because I was never clear on who it would apply to and who it wouldn't. My thought was that, oh, well, now all rental properties are open to the possibility of accepting Section 8 vouchers. That's how I had interpreted it previously. And so I like the clarification that they offer through this document. So take a few minutes and go back and look at this later today so that you're clear. But yeah.
Or what you can also do, which would be good, because this references anybody that would fall within the Landlord Tenant Act of Virginia.
Right.
And this depicts who does and who doesn't fall within that act. So pull up the act and read it. It's pretty interesting. But yeah, my nephew is a young fireman and owns a ton of houses and had no idea. And I said, you better watch out, brother. I said, you are definitely in the Landlord Tenant Act. If you do any of this stuff, you're going to get slammed for it. So
yeah. So
But
Jason, I'm not sure about this, but in order to be considered for the Section 8 for your property, aren't you supposed to go through a whole lot of inspections and this and that and the other? So if you own property and you say, well, I haven't had, my property has not been inspected by Section 8 folks, what can you say? I mean,
You can then say, I will have it inspected by Section 8 folks, because you're required to do that now.
Exactly.
If you own interest in.
If you get an application and that application is someone who wants to use their Section 8 voucher in order to, you know, help them pay the rent on this property, then you have to open that property up to inspection by Section 8.
You can't any longer. People used to say, I don't do Section 8.
Now keep
that was a choice that landlords had. I don't accept Section 8 vouchers. You're being told that if you own interest in 4 or more, you automatically have to open up to Section 8, and you'll go through what if the tenant wants to hang in for the 60 days it may require to get the people down and do the inspections and all that stuff, the landlord would have to.
So just keep in mind, it applies to those people who own more than 4 dwelling units, more than 4 homes or 4 condos or 4 whatever it happens to be in the state of Virginia. So,
and a duplex counts as 2.
That's right.
It doesn't count as 1.
That's right. Yep. So very, very interesting. And I thought this was very helpful in explaining and further defining how this applies to us in our daily lives. And so, you know, most of us probably don't work with landlords who own that much real estate, but if you do, they should be aware of this. And keep in mind too, it is incumbent upon them to disclose that information using this form right here. So, you know, it's not up to us to go and say, well, don't you own that house at 321 Main Street? And I'm pretty sure you have this house over here on Paul Street. You know, that's not our job. It's up to them to make that disclosure to us. But, you know, if they goof it up and get in trouble, I mean, that's on them, right? That's not on us. We're protected from that liability. So that was the source of funds discussion. That was cool, right? I thought it was really helpful. So, any questions, any thoughts, comments? Helpful? It's good, right? Yeah. So just go back
2021.
Yes. Yeah, 2021. So
awesome
excited.
job, Jason.
So excited. Thank you, Callie. So yeah, I think 2020, you know, it's really a conundrum, isn't it? Because so many people are hurting, you know, in the world, and specifically here in Hampton Roads. You know, we've got a lot of people that are struggling with the COVID. It has impacted all of us, obviously, but at the same exact time, you have this incredible real estate market, and it has been such an interesting dynamic in 6 months, 7 months, to see what's happening at the exact same time. You have, you know, the world is falling apart, but the real estate market is exploding. So it's really an interesting time to be a part of this industry and to be a realtor. So
a real funny story. Ralph Raymond, who was with our Kempsville office, and his wife is a physician, and she's taken a job in Reno. And of course, they went ahead and sold their house, closed on it, and are just doing a short-term rental because they didn't want to miss the housing market that we're having here. But trying to find a house in Reno, Nevada, and anywhere close to it, they had to increase their price from $600 up to $800, and they kept losing, putting in, you know, over the price and all of that kind of stuff. The last one, he said, well, here we go again. Offered $30,000 over asking price, guaranteeing whatever the appraisal came in, we would give the money for the contract. If it was $1,000 low on the appraisal, we'd bring 130,000 or whatever we had to bring, but that we would pay the contract price. He said they offered it sight unseen because they're still living here. On the very first day it came out, they looked at the pictures. As soon as the link came out, told their agent, put an offer, this is what we're doing. Agent called them back the next day and said, well, you lost. There were 20 other offers that you were competing. And even with guaranteeing whatever the appraisal came in that you would pay 30,000 above the list price, they got a better offer. So sorry. And we think we're in crazy land. Holy moly.
That is absolutely incredible.
Is that nuts?
That people have this access to cash like that.
The funds like that, yeah.
I mean, there's no way I could do something like that. So that's awesome. Well, God bless them.
Hopefully they'll find a house in Reno soon.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay. So when someone makes an offer, $20, $30, $40, $50,000 over, when we write up the offer, do we need to also submit proof of funds for them?
I think
if I were the listing agent, I would.
Yeah, I think
because
say, yeah.
Exactly. I think most listing agents would ask for it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And what was interesting when we were having this discussion, I think it was one of your meetings, Jason and Jonathan Howe was saying, don't forget with government funded loans, VA or FHA, they can't hold you to that because you're not allowed to really offer that in your agreement. VA and FHA won't guarantee those funds. And if it came down to it and the appraisal came in low and the seller, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, tried to hold the VA or the FHA buyer to the clause that they put in guaranteeing the appraisal, then they wouldn't be able to do it because it's not allowed anyway. Is that correct?
I think it's only on VA.
That was no, I believe
I think it's FHA too. I think it's
there
any
was,
government backed.
There was it does include the FHA, and so according to John, in his description, and so my thought and my takeaway was then that if I were a listing agent and I received an offer similar to that, how would I protect my seller in this event? And so my thought was perhaps we could do a separate contract that the lender doesn't necessarily see, which would, secure that offer to pay more than the appraised value, on the side, essentially. Something that was legal and binding in court, but not necessarily, required to go to the lender.
Well, I think they're allowed to pay over the appraisal. I just don't think they're allowed to put in the purchase agreement that they guarantee that money.
So who's guaranteeing what? The buyer or
the buyer is guaranteeing those funds, even if the appraisal should come in low. I mean, they can still do whatever they want to do.
Would that apply to an escalation clause?
Putting it in the agreement, John was saying, don't put it in the agreement because it doesn't hold up anyway.
If they're doing a VA loan and the VA says you can't do that, and there's I guess a side deal with another contract, is that legal?
No.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
I wouldn't think but I would. Excuse me.
Would that apply in an escalation clause as well, Jason?
Yeah, absolutely. It has to. Yeah. So even with an escalation clause, because a lot of times that's maybe where that's going to be written in, right? So if we're in a multiple offer situation and we include an escalation clause that says, you know, we're going to go up to 450 in increments of, you know, $1,000 or $5,000. But the appraisal then comes in at something less than the 450 we were obligating ourselves to through the escalation clause. I think it would be the same exact thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Jason, I just recently sold my house and it was to a VA buyer. And I did put that clause in, but I checked with his lender. And what the lender told me was if the buyer didn't want to do it, I couldn't force it. But if the buyer wanted to do it,
That's
they
fine.
could. Right. But my house, it appraised, so it was a non-issue. But the seller had been beat out. I mean, the buyer had been beat out a number of times. So they agreed to it. But I knew I was taking a chance.
Okay. Okay. And I think that's the way John explained it, was that, you know, they could if they wanted to, but the seller couldn't force them to through the contract, which, you know, I mean, kind of defeats the purpose, really. If you go through this whole ball game, you know, and then at the last minute, the buyer decides, you know what, I don't want to pay more than the appraised value, and you can't make me.
Right. And I think that's what you have to explain to your seller when you see offers like that coming in. And they are either VA or FHA, just explain to them what the reality is of it. They may say on paper they're going to do this, but we can't hold them to it if they choose not to. So if we have a conventional offer that's offering 10,000 over, hot diggity, we can hold their feet to the fire with a conventional product. We just can't with government products.
But can we talk about that since the source of funds?
That's not a source of funds. That's not where the funds are coming from.
Okay. All right. You're right. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
If the buyer knowingly does that, could that be considered fraud? What was a question there?
That would be an interesting legal question.
Yeah.
For Amanda, maybe.
I don't know.
I don't know if it would be fraud. Well, if they're guaranteeing it, knowing that they don't really have to guarantee it, I think that would be a little misleading. But once again,
I changed my mind.
As professionals, we should know that so that we can explain to our client in reality, this doesn't mean anything. So what do you want to do, Mr. Seller?
Right, right. Because I think what the law looks at is the intent, right?
Right.
So if you wrote this agreement with the intent to, you know, meet the obligation and come up with the additional cash.
Right.
But, you know,
well, my intent was to pay the difference, Mr.
Exactly.
Judge. I never said I wasn't going to pay the difference.
Yeah. So interesting discussion, though.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, I love this kind of stuff. My battery's going dead. I'm plugging in.
So appreciate you guys being here. It's been just after over an hour, so this was fantastic. So let's do it again sometime. Y'all take care. Enjoy.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you guys. Yeah.
Yay. Have a good one. Thank you again, Jason. This was wonderful. And Stacia, you're going to send the video of it, right?
I will.
Once you upload it and do that, and that way I'll send it to everybody who missed it today.
Cool.
Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.